a fireside chat with Julene Campion from Geisinger. She is the Vice President of Recruitment, Organization and Development and Learning at Geisinger, where she focuses on creating and implementing integrated and measurable talent attraction engagement solutions directly linked to the organization's values, vision, and strategic priorities. So I'm going to be chatting with Julene today about changing skill sets and L&D leaders as strategic business partners. Julene, how are you today? Glad to have you with us.
Hi, Bobby. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks again for hopping on. Looking forward to this discussion. I think right out of the gate, I'm going to kind of hit you up with a pretty broad question, multiple talking points. So bear with me on this. Hope you're ready for it. It's about the specific journey at Geisinger that you and I had discussed prior to the event. It was really good stuff. Can you kind of describe for us how L&D evolved from just overseeing the training programs and running the learning management system to being valued as a true strategic business partner? Maybe share some insight about some of the strategic workforce planning processes and that you use to ready the workforce of the future, if you will, making sure the leaders are agile. Can you talk about that and pivot and adapt to the shifts in the competitive landscape and disruptions in your industry?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, this has been a really interesting conversation to listen to over the course of the last couple of hours. I really enjoyed the panel that just wrapped up. So again, thanks to everyone for being on this platform today. I know that I am not an expert in any way, shape, or form, and I know many of you are. So I will just put that out there straight away. Yeah, so it's been a very interesting for all of us, a very interesting few 12 months or so. But I want to take us back for our journey in particular, back to May or June of 2019. And at that point, Geisinger welcomed our new CEO and president, Dr. Jaewon Ryu. And at that exact same time, about 30 days, I was asked to pivot and take on, in addition to recruitment, I was also asked to take on organizational development and learning. And so it was about that time when Dr. Ryu, who is, I would say, one of our best recruiters in the industry, maybe in the country, Dr. Ryu, who really believes in talent development and employee engagement, asked me and a colleague to come forward to the executive leadership team with a proposal on what would it take to move organizational development and learning forward at Geisinger. What's the investment? What are the priorities? And he asked for a 3-year plan. So my colleague and I put that together and went to the executive leadership team and reviewed it with them. And there were no concerns, no debate, just yes, of course, whatever you need, let's get it done. So the executive leadership team approved millions of dollars over the course of the next 3 years to invest in our organizational development, learning, leadership development, and engagement programs. Again, May, June of 2019. And the one thing our CEO asked of us is, could you make sure that we approach this as a one Geisinger? So we call ourselves the Geisinger family. So he said, I want this to be really approached as a one Geisinger family and not doing unique things for the health plan or the hospitals or the clinics or the School of Medicine or research. We really want this to be a one Geisinger approach. So again, of course, we said yes, and we were on our way. And then as we're moving through the investment and we're starting to look at our team, our long-term leader of that department had decided to retire. So we had an opportunity to relook at our leadership team and what are the skill sets that we want in the leaders of this particular function. And in our organization, it's part of the Human Resources division. And I knew I needed leaders in this division that understood our business, that understood things like the payer and provider connection. So we have both a health plan and we have doctors and nurses and clinics, right? We're an integrated health system. So I needed people who understood the reimbursement model, revenue management, how patient experience impacted our revenue, how medical students are educated in our country and beyond, and how we could recruit and retain medical students, and who understood the employee experience and really just the day-to-day business and operations. And so as we had the opportunity to relook at our leadership team, we chose leaders who had that kind of background, who were HR practitioners with a keen interest in organizational development, but more importantly, someone who really understood the employee experience and the leader experience on a day-to-day basis and what those individuals needed. So we began to build the team. We found a new vendor partner for our employee engagement strategy. We partnered with Korn Ferry to do an organizational needs assessment. We began doing competency research with all of our executive leadership team, and things were just humming. We were really excited about the work we were doing. And then just as we're getting ready to launch our competencies and finalize our engagement vendor and a lot of the other work we've been focused on, of course, now March 2020 comes along. Like all of you, we experienced and are still experiencing a pandemic. And personally, from a healthcare perspective, and I know we've all experienced enormous changes as a result of the pandemic, but if you want to talk about learning on the job for just a moment, we are in central Pennsylvania. That's the picture behind me in Danville, Pennsylvania, where I am today. It's a beautiful day. But we're also in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is much closer to New York City. And unfortunately, what happened to our Scranton, Pennsylvania facility early on in the pandemic is there was a patient who was COVID positive. But because of the lack of information coming or the confusion on what symptoms a COVID patient would exhibit, we, our team didn't realize this person was COVID positive, and no one wore personal protective gear when they went into this patient's room. And so as a result of that, we had double digits of our team members who were who contracted the virus and had no idea. And so it was really early on where we were struck in our own Geisinger family with the virus. And so what we did as OD and learning professionals is we did kind of stop all that work. We had to, right? This is the idea of becoming one Geisinger. We couldn't just keep doing our training stuff. We stopped all of our work and we decided we were going to get engaged in leading COVID work streams. And this is the part about understanding the business. And I think this will segue us into some of the more current things that we're doing. But this was a really important pivot for us. As I said, we had some providers in our Northeast regions who became COVID positive or they had symptoms, and so they had to be quarantined. So members of our team decided to lead the temporary housing initiative. And so what we did is we found partners in the regions, in all of our regions, that would temporarily house our employees if they were COVID positive or symptomatic or just didn't want to go home because they were afraid to bring the virus home to their family members. Now, in essence, that's a kind of a transactional, you're partnering with universities and hotels to get housing options for your providers. But really what it was understanding what was happening on the front lines and how this impacted our employees, how it impacted their leaders, how it impacted their families. And so not only did we lead the temporary housing efforts, we led our kids camp because all of the schools and daycares were closed down and our nurses and doctors and other providers had nowhere for their children to go. So that helped us understand what was happening on the front lines with our employees. And we also led a reassignment process, which matched employees from clinics and practices or surgery centers that had been closed down as a result of COVID and repositioned those employees to the front lines to really, manage the patients that were in the hospitals and clean the rooms and do the the clinic, the testing tents. And so the important part for us was to pivot and make sure that we understood what was happening on the front lines and got much closer to the business. And unfortunately, at that time, the business was stopping the spread and saving lives. And it kept us connected with what was really happening on the front lines.
Wow, so quite the journey, and that's why healthcare is kind of at the forefront of handling rapid change with all of this. So that's kind of a nice transition into the next question. For obvious reasons that you've gone over, many organizations and their respective workforces, they've been under tremendous strain. over the whole last year, the last 12 months. And healthcare systems, again, have been at the forefront of handling the rapid change. So can you kind of describe how you and your team have adapted to that and maybe explain some of the impacts throughout the entire organization?
Yes, absolutely. So, as I said, we really, in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't want to bury our heads in the sand and say we're L&D people or we're HR people. And, no one could, of course, do any training. Everything that we were doing had to go virtual. So that pivoting to the business was critically important. And really being able to operate in both worlds, if you will. So in addition to leading COVID work streams, we also had a lot of, projects that couldn't wait. So we were implementing Workday. We were launching a brand new career site. We were going through an HR operating model change. As I said, we were in the middle of an organizational needs assessment, which had to be stalled. But all the day-to-day work that you have to do as a practitioner in your department doesn't change. It's just a matter of, for us, it was a matter of understanding and listening and being really clear about how do the work that we do support the business and also be not deaf to what's happening. Again, people are trying to stop the spread and save lives. We can't be knocking on their doors saying, hey, would you like to do a new e-learning? We have this really exciting product, which we do have really exciting products, which maybe I'll talk about here in a little bit. But we knew we couldn't do that. So the question was, how could we continue moving the organization forward from a culture perspective, an employee experience perspective, and also meeting our new CEO's critical, key strategic priorities, because again, that's what he asked us to do. The investment was approved. So we were trying to, if you will, fly the plane and build it at the same time. And so I'll give you an example of how we accomplished that. As I said, we had, prior to the pandemic, selected have been going through an RFP process to select a new employee engagement vendor. And during that time, we found an opportunity to pilot a pulse survey during COVID and ask 3 simple questions. So basically, what's your biggest concern? And how's your mental health and well-being? And is there anything else you need us to know? Oh, I'm sorry, the other one was, do you have the tools, resources, to do your job? And so we did 2 pulse surveys during COVID, and we started helping our leaders understand we have to be continuously listening. And if we aren't continuously listening, our employees will stop sharing with us what's happening. And so during COVID, we actually launched these 2 pulse surveys, and we're able to very quickly share that information with our executives. The 2 clear themes that came out, not surprising, but our front care health providers were very concerned about not catching the virus and bringing the virus home. So when we learned that information and got really clear comments from our employees about specifically what was on their minds, everything from how their KN95 mask fit or didn't fit, how frequently they had to change out their masks, just very specific on what was troubling them and concerning them. We were able to, as a system, quickly address that through our employee town halls and through literally having leaders go on the floor and switch out masks with people in the moment to make sure they have what they needed. And then the other theme that came through, again, not surprising from our work from home colleagues, because like many of you, we had to send our entire, non-essential, if you will, staff off-site overnight. And so we heard from many of them that they didn't have the tools, equipment, or resources or connectivity to do their jobs. So we took that information, we partnered with our IT department. Microsoft Office Teams was not scheduled to go live for about a year. We worked closely with that team and said, we've got to get this going now, because employees need to not only understand how to connect through hardware, or a platform, they need that kind of connectivity. But what we also heard clearly is they needed connection. They need a connection with their colleagues, connection with their leader, and they weren't feeling that. And so as a result of the survey feedback, not only did we help to get teams launched more quickly, we got cameras to every employee's home, we got speakers to every employee's home, headsets to their homes. And again, that was a result of still being, a learning and development leader, but also doing it in a way that helps the business and the culture and our vision move forward.
So did you develop kind of a matching process for the redeployment of the platform? What did you call that? What was that called again? I can't remember if you've discussed that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that forward. That was also as a result of, so there were two things. Let me answer the question first. One is we, very early on when the pandemic started, we began shutting down non-essential surgeries and clinics like, for instance, dermatology or ophthalmology. We shut those clinics down, first of all, to stop the spread, but also to help reposition, reassign, redeploy. We can call it many things. Redeploy that staff to help where we had the patients and the community members that needed testing. And so in the beginning, it was just a matter of, okay, Bobby, you go here, Julene, you go here. It was crisis mode. And so there wasn't a lot of conversation. It was just literally, you go. And what we heard through our pulse survey we did was the fear and the, not only the fear, the anger of being told you must go or you will not, have a job, because this is where we need you. This is where we need you to go. And so when we heard that feedback, we stepped back and said, so is there a different and better way to do this? And again, one of our team members was leading the reassignment work. And what we did is we came up with what we call a matching process, which is a much more compassionate way to do this, but it's still just as effective. And we were able to move very quickly using technology. The leaders who had a need for staff and the leaders who had staff that were being basically furloughed because there was no work, we came up with, using a system called QuickBase, we came up with a matching process. And QuickBase would be able to quickly see where there is staff that has no work and there is staff that has work, and get those two managers quickly to talk with each other and have a conversation about that employee. So here's this employee situation. Here's what they need. Here's what they can do. Here's where they live. They don't have transportation. And for that two managers to have really great dialogue around what can we do together to get this employee back to work and to take care of our patients and stop the spread. And so that really changed the whole dynamic. And what we found is instead of employees being angry and frustrated and threatening to quit, is we had employees saying, oh my gosh, I love doing this. I never thought I would love working in this job, and I absolutely love it. And then they signed up for an extra job. So literally we had people take on new assignments and new jobs. And after the first phase of COVID was that we thought was over in October, so things started settling down. And then we had transfers, because for a while we shut down transfers. We had people saying, now I want to actually transfer permanently into the job I did on reassignment because I love my new manager. I love my new team. I never knew I'd want to do this. And so it turned into this really great opportunity for us that if we hadn't been listening to our employees, and if we as leaders had not been in that COVID work stream for reassignment, we never would have heard this. We never would have learned this. And so I guess what I'm saying here is you've got to be able to do both, right? You've got to be able to be in the work, in the business, part of that frontline work that's happening, and then also put on your OD or LD, L&D practitioner hat and say, so now how can we help be future oriented to drive results like employee engagement and recruitment and retention? And so that's one example of how I think our team, and I'm so proud of our team, our whole HR team, can do that, can kind of wear both of those hats. And that's where I think we drive the most value here at Geisinger.
So how did you convey to the employees throughout all of this, the transfers and the fears of job security and the redeployment, things like that? How did you let them know that you were hearing them and caring for them? How did you convey that to them?
And that's such an important part, right? Because sometimes we do surveys and then employees hear nothing. So we had a series of system leadership forums that we had started during COVID, something we had never done before. And now, of course, I always look for the good that come out of bad situations. We'll continue our system leadership forums, but we also started something called employee town halls with our CEO and leaders. And these were nights, these were weekends, these were mornings, whenever, and they were all taped. So we started a series of employee town halls, and we shared the results with all of our employees. We also put it on what we call a daily dose, which is our daily newsletter. So the daily dose went out. And then we gave managers talking points as well to share the pulse survey. But I think most importantly, oh my goodness, my computer just went to sleep. I'm going to keep talking, but I got to wake it back up. I think the most important thing that we did was we took action. So in addition to letting them know, we hear you, we got the results, here's what we're going to do. More importantly, we did it. So during huddles at the front lines, they talked about, we understand these masks aren't working for you, here's a new mask. So it's the action that we actually took. And then, as I said, for reassignment, we stopped saying you must go. I'm not saying we always were, we can't always say, here's a perfect match. But I would say for 85 to 90% of the time, we took that approach of, so we have a great opportunity and we think you can add value. You're going to be safe. You're going to be, cared for. This team wants to work with you. This manager's ready for you. And 9 times out of the 10, employees have welcomed that. They want to help. The truth is, everyone wanted to help. They didn't know how, and they were afraid. So I think the most important part, in addition to the traditional communication things we do, and you all probably do, we actually showed the action of what they asked us to do.
Yeah, critical, very important, and the support systems are key. So, thanks for all that. And I think I'm going to kind of shift again really quick here. It's a huge question for many organizations. Kind of looking forward to your insight on this. How do you and your team determine and develop L&D solutions that achieve, particularly a new organizational vision and some of the new key strategic priorities?
Yeah, this is exciting. And I probably talked a little bit too much about other things because I really wanted to also talk about, thanks, Bobby, for leading me here. So, as we're going through all these phases and we got through, pandemic phase 1, and then we all kind of started to breathe a sigh of relief, and our team, and Julene Brown, I think, is on the session with us today. I give her all full credit. And Julene Brown kept doing all of this behind the scenes, moving learning and development forward. And we are in the middle now of launching what we call the Geisinger Leadership Development Experience. And what that experience consists of, and right now it's for the top 250 or so leaders in our organization. This is phase 1. Phase 2 will take all leaders, and then phase 3 will be all employees. But the leadership development experience consists of several elements. So we introduced, as I said, the competency model to the organization. So all of these leaders went through a self-assessment on the competency models as well as their traits and drivers. They then scheduled by a platform on their own, self-scheduled a one-on-one debrief with a coach. As part of that debrief, they got insights about the competencies, where they probably have strengths and where maybe they have opportunities to develop, and some, again, insights about traits and drivers. And from there, we offered 4 virtual facilitated leadership accelerator courses. One's going on right now. Again, evenings, weekends, mornings, there's lots of options for people to tune in and do these courses. So that's one element, the facilitated online courses. Then we offered forums, so discussion forums. Following the courses, the leaders come back together and they have conversations around struggles, challenges, successes, and how are things going. So we're trying to create this community of leaders. Again, this one Geisinger approach that Dr. Rue talked about, leaders from across the organization, different departments coming together in a forum to discuss and have open and transparent dialogue about this is working, but this is not working. So discussion forums. And then the part I think we're most excited about is we've introduced self-paced learning in the form of a graphic novel. So we took our 10 competencies and we worked with Korn Ferry to create healthcare specific challenges, scenarios that are put into a graphic novel format, and all self-paced, but in the graphic novel, you get to read the scenarios, make some decisions, and then you get feedback through the graphic novel about this is why this is a better way to approach it, or just feedback. But again, all in this idea of graphic novel. And so I dare say it's fun to go through the self-paced learning. So that's how we're approaching learning now, is multifaceted and trying to give some time. Someone said earlier in this session, time for self-reflection, right? Not just keep bombarding our leaders with more and more information. but self-paced and time for reflection and time for community built into our learning programs.
Good. So you've got it covered and discussed at length here, what you're doing for your current employees. So I think a good follow-up question, we're actually, we only got about 5 minutes left, so hopefully you can get this in there. I kind of want to know, what actions do you and your team take to understand the landscape and keep pace of what's happening within the organization, within the greater industry and the economy at large? I mean, how do you effectively anticipate what kinds of talent the organization will need?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a great challenge. I would say, within our own industry, our own organization, I think I have covered that. Certainly, we've got to stay on the front lines. We've got to be involved in work streams and be very closely connected with our HR business partners, so we don't lose sight of what's happening with our own system, within our own organization. That's critically important to us as leaders. That's the whole topic of this conversation. But I think broader than that, in terms of the industry, I think we're very fortunate in a lot of ways at Geisinger. So over the last few years, we've been listed as one of the top 5 most innovative systems in the country, along with places like Mayo and Optima, Humana, other organizations like that. And I think the reason for that is because we are a very data-driven decision-making organization. And again, what I mean by that is we as an organization are constantly scanning the industry and constantly scanning for best practice and always want to lead best in class. And so I think the most important thing we can do as learning and development or OD practitioners is to make sure that we are tapping into those same resources. So it can be easy to spend a lot of time in our bubble with OD and HR and learning and development and be real deep in our expertise. And I think that's important and valuable, and which is why I'm so happy to be part of this. Thank you, Bobby, for reaching out. I think we have to do that. We have an obligation plus an expiring SHRM certificate coming up soon. We have to do this kind of work. And we have to stay completely plugged in with our partners. In our case, we have great partners over in our strategic marketing division here at Geisinger. And they are constantly scanning not only our competition regionally, but our competition nationally. And we have a great colleague there, Rachel, who is just brilliant, her and her team. And again, pulling insights from population health, from the way reimbursement models work, to the future of integrated health systems. And you've got to tap into your resources in your organization and throughout your network to make sure that you're looking at the data, you're looking at the trends, and you understand the forecast. So that's how we do it here. We've created great partnerships at Geisinger who then have great subject matter expertise in our industry.
All right. So yeah, just a couple of minutes left. I want to get this out. I'm not sure if or how fully you addressed this in regards to some of the engagement surveys. Have you reached out to everybody in the organization to find out, and this is unfortunately happening all over the place, to talk about levels of burnout that they might have? Have you explored that at all? Any new additional training or resources in that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about that. I heard that in the last panel as they were closing, and I wanted to kind of jump in, but I couldn't. So those 2 pulse surveys we did, we asked about mental health and well-being, got a lot of feedback. And like many of you, we have a lot of resources, but we heard very specific resources that we needed to offer, especially our physicians and our nurses. And so we just reinvigorated some of the resources that we already had as a result of the pulse surveys. Now, I didn't say this, but in November of 2020, so let me remind you what was going on. Second surge of pandemic, election for our president, murder of our family and friends of color, racial injustice, social injustice. In some ways, I can't believe we did an engagement survey in November, but the truth is we told our leaders, there is no good time to do an engagement survey. There's always a good time to listen. So we did the engagement survey in November, and we put a very specific question in there about burnout levels, and we define what burnout means, because we all know if you ask 5 people what is burnout, you get 5 different answers. So I think it's important that we put evidence to our questions and engagement and describe it in a way that people can relate to. And what we found, not surprising, is the higher the level of the higher the level of burnout, the lower the level of engagement. So that's, of course, important. But what was more important is to understand the health and well-being of employees. And so we are actually talking about this morning. We are actually gathering every element of data that we can. I said we're a very data-driven organization. We are leveraging every element of data we can because we are also a health plan organization. Those are two separate entities. So our health, information sits separate from our medical plan, but we can get aggregate data on how many, has there been an increase in mental health medications? Has there been an increase in gastric medications? More visits to psychiatry, more tapping into our EAP program. This is, heartbreaking to say, but have we had an increase in suicide? So we are actually going to really look at the data that equates to burnout, and then we're going to take a very strategic and thoughtful approach to how do we help our employees. So it is about training and development. Again, it's about leveraging all the data and all the analytics that we have as an organization to do the right thing for our employees.
Yeah, it all comes back to taking action, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. So, yeah, unfortunately, we could probably go on for another hour here, but we're out of time. But thanks so much for joining us, Julene. Love the insights into how you and your team determine and develop some of the L&D solutions that are kind of in line with the organization's new vision and key strategic priorities. Great stuff. Thank you again for joining us today. Hope you have a good rest of the day, Julene.
It's a pleasure. Thanks all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.